You're on. Are we good here with this? All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight to Wow Wednesday here at Spiritual Life Center. I'm so happy to introduce one of our wonderful, appreciated musicians who's been here so often with us for our World Religion series this summer. Catherine Mandella is bringing a program tonight called Cosmomusicology. So let's give Catherine a warm welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just get right into it. Let me make sure this doesn't feed back. And so thanks for everybody for coming, because I'm really excited about sharing this information. It's always fun, and there's always so many things going on, and it's always this evolving thing. And as usual, you know how I get going, and it can't shut me up sometimes. But what I wanted to do was let you know that this presentation that I'm going to do tonight is really a teaser. Oops, sorry about that. Because what I am going to talk about are 4 main parts of what cosmomusicology is and my concept of it. And the first one is the elemental mineral realm that I'm going to get into, and I'll touch on the plant realm as well. And then obviously there's the animal realm, and then of course the human aspect of that animal realm. And we realized that, it's too much information to fit into 1 hour evening, and so we're discussing about when a good time is to turn this into a class, and I'll actually deep dive into each of these 4 subjects within cosmomusicology. And hopefully January, February, maybe we're working on when a time would work out, but there'll be 4 classes that we'll be able to deep dive into this, and I'll be able to really explain a lot of this stuff more in detail. But with this, I always like to first get into the etymological part of of our language and what things mean. Like, we say things without really realizing that it's got even more meaning behind what we say. And so, I don't know, have anybody here ever been to my EcoMusicology program? A couple of people have seen my EcoMusicology program. It's been several years since I did that. Basically, my cosmomusicology is an evolution of that. So eco, if you break that down, it's a Greek word meaning oikos, which means home or hearth. And cosmo, or the cosmos, literally means arrangement or order or beauty even, which is, basically it's the universe viewed as an orderly, harmonious, and unified system rather than some random, chaotic, jumbled mess of rocks and gas and who knows what else. So, and then there's the musical side of it. And music really is, the sound it's really what binds the universe together. And, think about a lot of the scriptures, and God said, that's how it starts off with. So, but if you were to break music down, it comes from the Greek word muses, which is of or from the animal's mouth. And then, of course, ology is the study of. So keeping those in mind, this is just part of it. I was having fun. So to get in more depth with the meanings of words is, animal. Let's break down that word, for example. Animal comes from the Latin word anima, which if you're a Spanish speaker or a Latin speaker, you'll know that is how you'll say soul or, kind of sometimes spirit is intertwined with that, but it's the word for soul. Soul also means life, which means to have breath or a pulse, which is a vibration. So it makes you think, well, okay, we know that some of you have seen my programs before. We know that rocks vibrate. So it's like, okay, well, why wouldn't a rock be constituted as an animal? But that's a whole other story. We won't go down that rabbit hole yet. Maybe in one of the classes when we talk about minerals on that day. But what I do want to bring up is the word spirit. It actually comes from the Latin word respirare, which means to breathe. And how many of us don't breathe very well? Most of us don't. We shallow breathe, and we have all this stale, funky air at the bottom of our lungs. And that's why when you think, especially a lot of the Eastern religions, really focus on the importance of breath. And breathing and getting oxygen into our blood does so much more than we realize. And there are actual instruments, which I just realized I forgot one of them. But you know what? That'll be for the other class day. But there are musical instruments that will help stimulate nitric oxygen in helping oxygenate your blood. So moving right along, within the universe, there are three basic principles. Everything boils down to energy, vibration, and frequency. Energy has no beginning or end. It just always is. It just changes and transmutes. So with this this kind of trilogy in mind, it's kind of similar to something else we know about. So we've heard of the Holy Trinity. Some of us may have grown up in a practice that would refer to it as the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but in actuality it goes much further back than Christianity. It's actually, if you break it down into its sacred geometry, we'll start with the sun at the top. Well, that actually is what is created when you have the union of mother and father. So there are aspects of these areas of a Holy Trinity that really break down to mother equating to light, which also addresses philosophy when it gets into the human practices and how we understand, the whole concept of mother. What is mother? And then father, it equates to sound, and which is, the music comes from this realm. And when you get both of those together, then you get a whole, which is, son, which is also where we get the word son, S-O-N, or child. And then it's also the form. So that architecture could be, not just a building. It could be the architecture of a physical body, of an instrument, of something that had taken shape, the molecules got all agitated together with frequency, and it vibrated until it created something. And that first sound is Om. And if you keep saying Om, 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 when you think of one of the first words humans say is mom, comes from this aspect, which is basically the first frequency of consciousness. So, this picture right here is of a crystal of mine. I took that picture near Union Valley Reservoir, and I had learned that the first physical object that was formed in our universe was a crystal, because God or source or prime creator basically got bored and wanted to experience itself, which is all of us, and it splattered out into the universe to gain experience from all these different angles out there. And it needed to transmit this thought. And when you think about, you've heard the saying, where thoughts go, energy flows. So something needs to transmit that. And so the crystal, and the quartz crystal in particular, is the purest form, is that transmitter. And you think about our technology even today and our computers, the crystalline technology is in that to help transmit frequencies, transmit data. They continue to do this to this day. In fact, it is an ancient tool, and even in ancient times, has done a lot of wonders for civilizations over the eons. It can also be used in destructive ways, which that's a whole other tangent. We can talk about Atlantis in another time, but we're going to move on now because we're going to get into aspects of how the sound binds our universe together. And here's our galaxy. There's thousands upon thousands of galaxies out there. The one that we're pretty much residing in now is the Milky Way galaxy. Now, how many people have heard of people called like Pleiadians or Arcturians, this and that? Do you know what, if they were out there and they were going to call us something, you know what they would call us? Any guesses? Aliens. We would be. Well, there's people don't realize this. They would refer to us as Sagittarians. Why? Because we actually are not. Our Earth is in a strand of the arm of the Milky Way galaxy that didn't initiate in the Milky Way galaxy. We're actually part of a small dwarf galaxy called a Sagittarian galaxy. And galaxies will bump into each other. In fact, the Sagittarian galaxy has bumped through the Milky Way galaxy 3 different times until it's settled where it's at today. And you'll see it's kind of hard to see in this image, but there is kind of like a arm that branches off that looks like it's kind of fuzzy and not exactly straight as some of the others, and that is the section of the Milky Way galaxy that we are in now. So, people think, if you go out into space, it'd just be emptiness and you'd get lost. But actually, there's maps to the galaxy. So maybe one day, we'll be able to pull that map out and, okay, let's see, Bart will go to this part of the arm of the galaxy. Who knows what will happen in a short time, because our technology is expanding very fast. But like I mentioned earlier, it's frequency, it's sound that's binding this all together. So this is an actual recording of the Milky Way galaxy. Is my head in the way? Now, everything in the universe has its own resonant frequency. This rock has a resonant frequency. Even this knob on this mic stand has its own resonant frequency. And understanding how you can interact or manipulate even something, you can do this through resonant frequencies. In fact, I had this student one time when I was teaching music. I was teaching him how to play the didgeridoo, and he was a genius little kid, and he didn't play with cars and things. He had some device that worked with frequency, and he wanted to find the resonant frequency of his bathroom. And he had turned up because he had learned, I can't remember what the legal decibel amount is in a neighborhood, but he took it to the max, and he said he could get the walls of his bathroom to start like vibrating. So everything's got a resonant frequency, even each planet. And you can even take it further to, which I'm going to talk about our chakra system and how there's correlations to not just a musical note, because every planet has a musical note, which I'm going to talk about in a minute with the keyboard. But every planet also is associated with an organ, there's a spleen, there's a heart, there's the solar plexus. Obviously, that's going to be the sun. There, Jupiter's the third eye. We've got a correspondence to everything. We're basically just fractals of everything expanding out to the universe, because that's what, as God beings that we all are, we expand. That's the whole point of our being, is to expand. And I have a recording of each planet's resonant frequency record where you can actually hear it. Pay attention to the differences. So that was the mineral realm that we just touched a little bit on right there. What I have learned, and you'll hear this in traditions in Hinduism, in other Eastern philosophies, they will explain, and American philosophies will explain that the human soul, we have to go through these first three realms before we can become a human. So, and it doesn't mean that one's a higher or lower stage. It's part of a soul's evolution. And really, this realm that we're in right now, this third dimensional realm that's kind of feeling weird because time is going all over the place these days, we are actually experiencing all these lifetimes at one time. And it's a kind of a really mind-boggling, mind-bending thing to think about right now. But a good example of what it would be like for us if we remembered all our lives all at once, everything that we're doing everywhere. It would be like we were a schizophrenic. And that's what these people are experiencing. They're experiencing all these dimensions at once. In fact, when you think of the word dementia, people with dementia, they're seeing multiple dimensions at the same time. So there are what's the term I'm looking for? Safety stops that will prevent us from going to not be able to function in this realm that we're in now. That's, again, another story for another time, but I want to get into the plant realm now because there's so many cool things that we can learn from plants. Now, plants, it's known that the most spiritually advanced beings, they're not the most, but a very spiritual advanced being would be in the form of a tree. And why do you think that would be? So if you were to look at a tree, they've got their roots in the ground, so they're grounded, but they're also very in touch with the sky, the spirit realm as well. And so they've got the yin yang already figured out. And these, if you think about indigenous traditions all around the world, the plant kingdom is known as our helpers. Whereas like animals would be our guides, the plant realm, we get our medicine from plants. So the cool thing about the plant realm, and I did bring my midi sprout by demand, and it is a very cool thing. We have this Schefflera here that does have something to say, I'm sure. Actually, you know what? I forgot to mention before I went to the forest realm. It was really interesting. Before you all came, I was setting up the rocks. I was going to try to see what rocks might wanted to have sung for us today. None of them wanted to say anything, not a single one of them. And then I found this one little piece of hematite, which I thought was kind of interesting that it would be a hematite that would want to say something. It's a very small piece of hematite right there, but let's see what the hematite has to say. I found it interesting that it is associated with blood, with the bloodline. And I think, you know what, I just realized some other correlations. I don't know about you, but lately I've been wearing a lot of red. And I've been noticing other people wear a lot of red. And this all has to do with the harmonics of the universe because, we actually react to it whether we realize it or not. And that's why a lot of us will sometimes, show up somewhere all wearing the same blue shirt or, we're all wearing turquoise that day. It has to do with that. And I think that my feeling is that this blood, this heart center that, that we're in this time of really getting past former traumas and moving on to the future and going on to the next phase. And this is a time for us to face a lot of these things, is the correlation that I'm seeing with this. I'd be curious to see what other people are picking up on. But I'm gonna change this to the plant since we're with the plant realm. And I think we did this last time, but I'm going to talk about how animals interact in a forest. But for us, because everything is connected and we actually have abilities to telepathically communicate. We've been told, oh, that's, you have to go to school for that, or you have to, have a grandma that was good at that. No, we actually all have this ability. And this plan is agreeing with that, apparently. But why don't we all, collectively, send love to this plant and see how it may respond, right now. it's always hard to stop it. I don't know about you, but I was hearing, like, when it was like starting to really feel the love, I heard the spectrum of the notes expand really high and even really, really low. And what's cool about not just this ability that we have and that we can connect with plants and talk with plants, in the animal realm, I'm going to touch on how the animal realm will also interact with plants. So the animal kingdom, the animal realm, is pretty vast and has a lot of interaction with not just Earth, but they also have a galactic aspect to them too. People think, oh, it's just humans out there in the galaxy, in the universe and other galaxies. But they actually are, our animal neighbors are also galactic as well. And not only do they guide us, as on Earth, there are known as our spirit guides. They also guide us in the skies, and they also have have a major role to play on this living library we call Earth, because a lot of these beings that are pretty much most life on Earth has come from somewhere else. Some have developed here and have interacted with others. But what's cool about some of their roles is, they have different constellations that are named, for them. For example, this is Sirius A. It's the largest one in the Canis Major constellation. Canis, we know, is the dog star. This is a frequency that has been recorded of Sirius A. So the cool thing about the animal realm is that they have a lot of jobs, like, for example, birds and forest, trees and plants. All along their outer layer, you could call it the cambium layer, have these little mouth-shaped receptors that respond to bird songs. They respond to insect buzzing wings by them too, but they actually, bird songs help the circulatory system of a tree. So if you were to take birds out of a forest, it would be like, eating a bunch of carbs and dairy products and nothing else, and plaque building up in your arteries. It would be very difficult for them to circulate, get their water and their nutrients up and down their bodies that they need. And that's the terrestrial realm. In the water realm, whales and dolphins are serving a similar purpose. They have other jobs too. It's a whole other galactic story to talk about whales and dolphins. However, the songs sung by whales and dolphins also are aiding the frequencies within the watery part of the world, which is most of the planet. Now, interestingly, and this is something, God, I could get on a whole tangent about noise pollution. But one of the things that we don't realize is how detrimental it is noise pollution. We live in a very noisy world. I'm going to share some slides here in a minute that will show what a healthy state of noise would be as opposed to an unhealthy state. And the whales there's so much noise pollution in the ocean, and unfortunately, with all the shipping traffic and other activities that happen in the ocean, they've changed their frequency. Usually, they would be singing in certain frequencies that would help coral reefs, that would help fish stock, that will help a lot of other life forms in the ocean. But because ships are constantly emitting not only just the engine noise, but sonic waves, their sonar, whales have had to change their frequency to a very low tone so that they could actually communicate with each other. It was really interesting during COVID. remember when all the shipping and airline traffic, everything halted, and all we were seeing all over the world, animals were like coming through the cities, and dolphins were showing up in Venice and off the coast of India that I haven't seen in decades. Well, they were picking up whale songs in South Carolina from whales singing in Ireland. So that's how far their songs will travel. And noise actually travels 4 times faster and farther in water than it does in air. So having a healthy environment of sound is very crucial to our health. And we think about all the things that make our bodies not function so well. A lot of it has to do with the noise we're around. And I don't know. They keep talking about this law of passing this law in California to ban gas combustible gardening blowers and lawnmowers. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet, but every time I hear one, it's just like I can't handle it. So the other thing too is that because humans for so long have become so detached from so many things. We suffer from a separation sickness, and especially from nature. We've had the ability to talk with plants and animals and rocks, but most of us have forgotten this. Some of us are relearning this, but we don't even know, when. Like for example, I'm going to play this piece right here. See if you can identify this animal. You recognize it? You didn't hear her, did you? Especially right here in Sacramento. Especially if you live on the west side of Sacramento. If you have said sandhill crane, you're correct. So I know for me, when I hear sandhill cranes, I know either winter's coming or summer's coming, because I live in the flyway of sandhill cranes. They actually, we're lucky that we are their winter ground. They come to winter in this part of the world, and they'll go up as far as even Alaska, but mostly like Canada, British Columbia. There's other populations along the East Coast as well, in the central part of North America. But every time I hear them, I know where the season is at, and I know when it's going to turn colder or hotter sooner when they come. And I've noticed over the years that, like this last year, they left in the fall time really early. They started heading north. Actually, in the fall, they were heading south really early because it got hot really quick. And I've also noticed there was times when we were having a lot of storms that they had left early because they're paying attention to the electromagnetic frequencies in our atmosphere, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we used to be able to sense this. So, for example, I remember hearing a story like in the early days of Sacramento, like probably still like in the 1848 still, and they started building the city, and they were talking with some Maidu people, which Discovery Park at the mouth of the American River. That actually wasn't the original outlet of the American River. The I Street Bridge, it used to kind of flow and go out there. They punched it through to build the railroads about a decade later. But it was still a floodplain, and Maidu would spend their time then in the floodplains for the summer. And these newcomers noticed that they just up and left one day, and there was no weather to really prove it, but 2 days later, big flood came. And so they asked, well, how did you know? Like, how did you know to leave? Well, because they paid attention to the signs. They were still connected with the earth, something that we've lost and really need to relearn. Many people are doing that, and it's something that we have to do if we're going to maintain our health. So, oops, what happened? Um, so this graph right here, I'm going to mention Bernie Krause a little bit when I do the actual class on animals. I'm going to really get more into work that Bernie Krause has done. He was a musician, but he basically developed, long story, he developed the Dolby recording system. And then he also, you might have heard him he had conducted an animal orchestra. So he had learned that the animals, this is a recording, he went out into nature, he got this clip in Borneo this is the sound graph of what this area where Camp Leakey was at. And if you look at the graph, everybody leaves each other room space for communication. You know, you've got the insects, you know, in the higher register, in their lane, more or less, and then you've got, you know, the chestnut warblers, you've got the gibbons down below. Everybody's leaving space for people to talk. Somebody will say something, and they'll listen, and, you know, they'll be able to communicate, so it's not this big cacophony. If you were to go record out here right now, in fact, there's a really cool app that you can download on your phone. I think it's free. If not, it's very cheap. It's called Merlin. Have you heard of Merlin? It's free, yeah. And it's a very cool device. It will help you. You can just go out, see, and it'll pick up the birds of the area that you're in. But it'll have a graph just like this. And you'll notice if you're here and there's a bunch of cars or planes or motorcycles or whatever, it's just a big it's a big just ink across the graph where people aren't listening to it. We've lost the ability to listen. Not everybody did, and we're relearning to do this. But, you know, think about the young folks of today. How many of you have been on calls and you're explaining something to them and they answer something that completely did not relate to what you just said? You know, communication is challenging for a lot of people that have grown up in a world that is all technology and no social skills. I'm not saying that all young people are this way, but it is definitely something we can all notice. Now, this piece right here, I'm going to play it. That was flat. So if you look at that graph, this is an orchestra. A lot of composers in, you know, the time of Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, they understood how nature has its spaces for communication and learned this. And when they developed their compositions, they would have their violins, you know, fill this space. The bass would come in this, you know, and they would all have their specific realms. And, you know, we've often heard, you know, oh, plants prefer classical music. It's because plants, it's a language they speak. It's part of harmonics that make sense to the human ear instead of a big cacophony of things. I suppose it's a whole other rabbit hole we can talk about as to why, you know, why people would be attracted to like heavy metal, AC/DC, Metallica. You know, a lot of us would go, ugh. But some of us, you know, I remember having a friend that said it was relaxing to him to listen to that kind of music. And I'm like, well, where are you resonating? What's going on internally for you to resonate at that, you know, that cacophony? You know, there's a cacophony going inside oneself to resonate with that. And just something to ponder. We don't need to keep going on that one. However, moving right along, I had kind of briefly mentioned the electromagnetic frequencies of Earth. We call this the Schumann resonance. We don't need to get into detail about who Schumann was, but birds are one of the essential frequencies on our planet to help regulate the electromagnetic frequencies on the planet, which is so important that we have birds and we don't keep destroying their habitat. But it directly affects every life form on this planet, including us. So, as I said, energy never begins or ends. It just keeps transforming. It keeps moving. And in order for things to be able to go in a harmonious path, there's certain, harmonics that you're going to want to follow. So solfeggio frequencies, the Fibonacci sequence, like everything, math and music is really one of the same. It's just reflections of each other. And I've got a set of tuning forks right here that are of the solfeggio frequencies. If you were to add up each one, like this lowest one is 174 hertz, and I don't know if this is going to, I don't know if you hear this. Where's the mic? Can you hear that? You can hear that? So, and there we go. Each of them will correspond to a dimension, also a chakra, and every one of them, if you were to add up their frequency, their hertz, because you'll see this one's 174 hertz. If you added 1 plus 7, that's 8, and there's 4, 174, so 8 and 4 is 12. 1 and 2 equals 3. Each one will add up to 3, then 6, then 9, and 3, then 6, then 9, and 3, then 6, then 9. So there's a whole mathematical process to everything, because it's just what our universe relates to, if that makes sense. So, and then, of course, there's other frequencies, too. There's ones of the angelic realms. This is actually of the ohm frequency. And this one is at 136.1 hertz. Hertz is just how many cycles per second a sound wave would move. So I don't know if you can hear it. Where's my little thing here? Oop. You hear that? It's very low. Which brings up, there are things, we're only able to hear, roughly 20 to 200 hertz frequency, the human ear, and which is very limiting, because if we were to be able to hear the whole spectrum of the conversations out there, like, have you ever heard elephants talk or giraffe talk? Or even whales, like the large baleen whales. We hear the songs, but we don't hear all the low guttural things, because they're actually quite chatty. If you got a microphone that can pick up those low frequencies and turn it up to a decibel that we can hear, it's, actually I should get a recording and add that to my, I'll do that for my class. But anyway, it's amazing what goes on. We don't realize that even these low frequencies and the high frequencies that we don't hear, they're affecting our bodies, whether we're hearing them or not. So it's important to understand, the harmonics of the universe. And we've all learned about, like, pi, for example, 3.41, and that everything in the universe can be divisible by this. And, you'll see it in nature everywhere, not just on Earth, but, galaxies or, same basic format. But I don't have it here, but you know how you've seen, like, if you were to take 0 and 1 equals 1, and then if you take 1, then the next number would be 2, and you added 1 and 2, that's 3. So 3 is that last number next to the 2, and you would add those, and it would be 5, and you would just keep building up again. It's something, to just talk about it, not write it down, my head wouldn't have, I like to see things written down, but you'll start to see patterns. Everything in Earth and the universe is based on patterns. And when they are done in a harmonious way, we call this sacred geometry. So frequencies will create formations. This thing, it might get, I don't know if anybody's got hearing aids. Hopefully, I try to keep it at a low, but this is called a Chladni plate. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's basically a plate, and you put sand on it, and you have it up to a frequency, and you can change the frequency, and you'll see the patterns change formation. And these things happen on Earth. When you look at, satellite images of the planet, and you'll see these weird shapes in sand dunes, it's because of the frequencies coming out of that part of the Earth. Or planet, for that matter. You ever seen the poles of Saturn or Neptune? They're hexagons, not round. And the higher the frequencies, the more complex the patterns become. And it's exponential. You can make one of these, like you get a bucket and you get like a big balloon and stretch it over there, and you can put a hole in like a tube and just use your voice. You can kind of make simplified ones of these. The volume is very low. That may be a good thing. Anyway, you get to understand the gist of it. So we see this in nature. So when things form, they're being formed by a specific frequency from wherever they're growing from whatever part of the world they're growing from. You see this on the backs of turtles, fruit we eat. In fact, it said, that fruit, the organs that they best serve when we eat them, and it said that we should eat the rainbow, and our fruits will cover the gamut of the rainbow because each color has a frequency. And it's just the opposite side of the spectrum. You've got, the sound, and when you get higher up, it turns into light. And, you look at, like, for a strawberry, for example, what organ do you think that would be good for? The heart. How about the apple? Here's another one. The apple's a good example of and a very healthy thing to eat. Doctor says, eat an apple a day, keep the doctor away. There's reason for that. It's got something very fundamental in its shape. It's called a toroid. So basically, you can see the seeds in the middle. That would be like the heart. And our Earth is doing this. So if you ever saw satellite images of the Earth with the aurora borealis, and the way the frequencies go in and out of the Earth, it makes this big donut shape. And the apple is precisely that frequency that's creating it. And it's a complete formation that helps our body get our energetic directions in a complete form, which is why it's so good to eat one a day. Of course, we've got citrus, like avocado. What do you think that would be good for? What does it look like? What anatomy does it look like? Huh? Yeah. I'm sure it actually does serve that, but gonads, basically. They're very healthy for gonads. So men, have your avocado toast in the morning. But, even rattlesnakes, when you think about, like, the frequencies they will create, and if they're not a rattlesnake, there are other snakes that might imitate one by, finding grass to make that same rattle, more of a defense mechanism. But still, it's going to help shape its geometry, its own sacred geometry. And of course, that flower, that pattern right there is exactly the Fibonacci sequences. You can see it just spiraling out. In fact, I've learned from a friend of mine that's a hairdresser, says our hair does that. She knows how to cut hair because she follows the Fibonacci sequence on our head. Eyeballs and insects, same thing. So this is something that I'm going to share. This is a place in Azerbaijan that's a national park, actually, called the lithophones of Gabustan. Not all rocks do this, but in some parts of the world, this is the frequencies that come out there. Yeah, it's, there's a reason why we are born where we are on the planet. People think, oh, I don't want to live here, whatever. But you chose that place to be born for a specific reason, and it has to do with your frequency. It's the frequencies that are coming out of the planet in that area. If you were to think of like a soccer ball, and you know how there's all the hexagons all around it, and where they have the nodes, where they come together, would be similar to where you would find vortices on our planet. So, that's why we've got, there's chakras around the planet, same thing. This will be something I'll talk to more about, cover more in the class, but this sacred geometry is found everywhere. Indigenous people all over the planet understood this and were inspired when they were creating their artwork or baskets or, whatever their creations were. And I'm gonna play some instruments, and it's an opportunity for me to instill the importance of folk music, our native music, which is dying. It's, going to the wayside. Every generation gets a little less and less. And it's so important to not forget this. Not that we can't evolve and create new stuff. We can do that too. But to know where we come from and the instruments that come from there, because the instruments are going to sound like the part of the world they're from. The music is going to sound like the part of the world they're from. And when we lose that, we become like a big synthesizer. Like, I can just play the synthesized piano, but it's lacking high tones and low tones. A machine is not going to be able to get all the frequencies that a living being can. So I'm going to have you close your eyes, and I'm going to play, and I'll let you know when you can open it. I'm going to play a flute that pertains to one of these photos, and see if you can just think, cover your eyes while I play it, and see if you can tell what basket or what photo this will belong to. Let's see, where shall I go first? I'm going to do this one. No cheatsies. Keep those eyes closed. Okay, you can open your eyes. See if you can tell which photo, which geometry that you see, which creation that was inspired by the frequencies of that part of the world it would be. You think it's one of the top ones? One of the bottom ones? Which side? The right side, yeah. So you've got that's actually a photo of in a mosque. So the instrument that I played is called a ney. The Persians will say ney. The Arabs will say nai. It basically means reed. So in this part of the world, in that part of the world, the reeds will grow with specific nodes. You can probably see them. See how there's like nodes that are pretty close together. Very different than, bamboo is going to have, I'll show you in a minute. I don't want to show you now because it'll give it away. But the reeds are going to be, and the frequencies that something coming out of this reed are going to pertain to that part of the world. So that's where, people, how come in the Middle East we've got these scales that have half flats and notes in between notes. Well, in that part of the world, these frequencies naturally occurred and inspired the beings and the people living there. So close your eyes again. We're going to go to the next one. Okay, where do you think that one belongs to in these grand schemes of pictures? Bottom left. So sounds like Irish, like that, like the Celtic lands. And the art definitely is going to sound like it's music. And I have learned that from different parts of the world that musicians back in the day could actually read these artworks like music. That each bend had a specific frequency associated, and they could actually play it and read it. I think this is a lost art. I've searched and searched to see if anybody actually can figure this out. I haven't come across any. I just kind of created my own idea of what I think it would be. But definitely you will see that music will definitely reflect the artwork of that part of the world as well. Are you ready for the next one? Okay, close your eyes. Okay, let's see. Where shall we go this time? Where do you think that goes? Upper left or right? It could be challenging. So the upper right one, yeah, that is actually a Maidu, a basket made by a Maidu woman. You all know who the Maidu are, right? So this flute that I'm actually playing, even though this cane is a rundo and it's actually an invasive species, there is a native cane to this part of the world that they would make their flutes from. Originally, they were made with just 4 holes like this. Over time, flute, this is kind of a whole history lesson. Maybe I don't have a whole lot of time to get into it. But flutes did develop simultaneously around the world, even though the cultures never intermingled. But there will be some correlations there. But anyway, yeah, so this is an example of a Maidu sound. And then I'll go ahead and obviously I'll just play the next one because it's obvious that this flute is going to associate. But what does it sound like is the question. This thing is in the way a little bit. Wait. Where do you think that is from the world? That melody. What does it sound like to you? It's interesting. It does. It's interesting that you say that because that piece actually is from the western part of Africa, and there are Western African connections to Central America. So there could be definitely correlations there. There are correlations with artwork pyramids, those faces. So, yeah. But the zigzag lines, but then you've also got that big spiral in the middle, which is the symbol of infinity. You'll see it on petroglyphs all over. From all over the galaxy, you'll see the symbol. In fact, if you were to take an acoustic piano and tune it, make sure all the keys are all tuned up, and if you keep playing it, it'll eventually it'll go sharp, which means higher on the upper one on its own naturally. It's part of a natural progression to keep like growing, expanding. So it's just a natural process. It won't stay homeostatic. Our hearts don't stay homeostatic. If your heart is always da-da-da-da, you've got other problems. So, yeah, I know I'm got lots to say. I'm almost done, though. But anyway, Pythagoras, we've all heard of him, right? He was known for lots of things like math, geometry, astronomy, philosophy, and music. Well, he understood that the cosmos had a harmonic resonance to it. It was not chaotic. It had order, which got the word cosmos. So, wrapping up, I'm almost there, but you'll see it in the geometry, like in the Pantheon and in the geometry all over. And there you'll hear scales, musical scales, for example, like the Ionian scale, the Mixolydian, the Dorian scale. If you talk to an architect, they'll know that there's a Dorian style of architecture. There's a Mixolydian style of architecture, because it all has to do with harmonics and mathematics. And indigenous people, they understood this. It's important. This was kind of where I wanted to bring up something interesting. Right here, is that with religions, the word God actually comes from the word good, which comes from an ancient word meaning day, because indigenous people, in the Americas and other parts of the world where there was a lot of vegetation and water, the day was good because the light grew your food, you can see things, you can get about your life. Whereas when you think about the other religions that developed in the other parts of the world, well, after the Great Deluge, which was about 12,000 years ago, it was a great desert. When you think of Judeo-Christianism and Islam, they developed in a desert. And for them, God, day, was punishing. It was hard. It was strife. And that's why you see that the culture developed this region where, their God was a punishing God, which it really was referring to nature. So, of course, Mozart, we can talk about him during the class, but he developed one of his concertos in G from a starling that he raised. You'll get to hear that when you come to my class. But today, I wanted to share this because if you can go up there, I think I might try to get myself up to that observatory in Cameron Park. But today, we not only have a solar eclipse that I think is happening right now as we speak on the east side of the world, there's also a new moon. There's also the Perseid meteor shower. And there's also a 6-planetary lineup. And here is the chords. Remember how I told you each planet has a chord? Have you been having kind of crazy days lately and seeing accidents and just kind of weirdness? Well, musically, this is what it sounds like. If you were to line these planets out and put the notes to them, I charted it out, and this is what it sounds like. Let's see, what were the notes? That's the chord right now. Does that sound harmonic? Maybe that's probably why we're not feeling, right on task with things. I've seen 3 accidents, had to drive around several of them. And, the importance of acoustic music is important, too, because I had mentioned how frequencies get cut off when you digitize something. It actually cuts off the high and low frequencies of things, so you're not getting the full benefit of those sounds. So, getting people to, embrace acoustic music as much as possible and not just be all electric is another thing. And this is all lined up with our chakra system. And if you notice, our center one is the heart. And if you notice the symbol, I don't know if you could see it really well, but it's actually the Star of David, or really what it actually is, a Merkaba. Merkaba in Hebrew means vehicle. And it's a vehicle because we are actually stargates ourselves. We're little mini Earths. And it's said that the human consciousness began in Lyra. And Lyra, not only do we know that, we have feline beings associated with it, but it's a musical instrument. It's a lyre. And if you think about all the symbology that we've been exposed to over our lives, who is we got the lion in, all the symbolism in The Wizard of Oz. He was the fearful one, right? And if you look at, he finally found his courage. Courage comes from the word core, which means heart. So the message there is for us humans is to get rid of the fear. We have been so embedded with fear. Don't do this. You're going to, get this, or don't go with that. Somebody will attack you, or whatever. If you are in your own power and you know how to feel the harmonics of the area, you'll know whether to go somewhere or not, or what to do, or to defend yourself if you need to. You shouldn't need. We're in the time of we need to learn that we are our own leader, our own healer, and our own. What was I going to say? We're our own leader and our own healer. So with that's how we ascend, through the heart, through love. Love actually is the emotion of transmutation. And I wanted to leave some time for questions. And I have a reading list that I can share here. If you want to take a picture of this has also been live streamed and recorded, so if you want to refer back to this. But these are some good reads right here. The Pure Human, very good read. It should be a high school mandatory read in all high schools all over the world. Greg Braden wrote this, and it has to do with our human divinity and how technology, AI systems can threaten that very thing. The Lost Gospel of the Inner Divinity is another one he's recently written, another good one. The Book of Enoch, I'm really looking forward to when Abba comes to talk about the Ethiopian Bible, because the Book of Enoch is there. You'll get to hear about that. And then The Prism of Lyra is written by Lisa Royale Holt, who explains the origins of humanity. And Graham Hancock is ancient historian, good information. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But anyway, we can wrap it up right here. Does anybody have any quick questions before we wrap it up? Yeah.
Do you know if the human body resonates at 110 hertz, the same as the hypogeum in Malta?
It can vary, just like the Earth can vary. Like the Earth was generally, 7.81 hertz. It's been spiking into the 90s, even over 100, because it's as we ascend, our frequency ascends as well. Yeah. Is it on? It's on.
So
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're not going to be able to take the questions tonight, but who's interested in more from Catherine? Because, she obviously has so much to offer us, right? And she has this whole class series developed. So we're going to be looking at where we can fit that in. So, I'm sure she is happy to have her talk with you a little bit just after, or, contact her, and then definitely explore this more in the future. So I'd love to hear your feedback. We're going to take an offering now. So if Lucas can pull up our slide for our offering blessing. As it is these offerings that help us bring presenters like Catherine to Spiritual Life Center. So there's one on the back of the chair, so you can definitely do that. Here we go. And let's say our offering blessing together. Divine love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God. And our ushers are going to pass the basket. We thank you for your support.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a blessing.
Thanks.
We'll bless you in just a moment. It's being live streamed, yes. have to get it through YouTube. It's on our YouTube channel. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll just, as soon as we're done with the offering, we're going to do a blessing for Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And I learned this offering appreciation blessing a little bit different than SLC. So can somebody help me do it the SLC way? All right. You all know it. Okay. So let's give Catherine some love and thank you for being here with us tonight. All
Thanks.
right. So Catherine, we love you. We bless you. We appreciate you. And when we behold God's love as you. Thank you
I
so
should have
much,
hooked
Catherine.
myself up to the MIDI right there to see what I sounded like with all that love.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you on Sunday.
Thanks. God, I don't know how it happened. It was like, I looked at it, and it was like, it was like 19 after, and I thought, oh, cool. And then I looked at it, it's like, yeah, it's crazy.